I thought the hardest part would be watching him leave. I was wrong. The hardest part was realizing I never understood why he left. My name is Ethan Carter, and for the longest time, I believed I knew exactly when my relationship with Noah Bennett started falling apart. I thought it was the arguments, the misunderstandings, and the endless nights when two people who cared about each other somehow ended up feeling like strangers. But looking back now, I realized the real breaking point was not the fights. It was everything we never said. Noah and I had been close for years. We shared a home in Seattle, built routines together, and created a life that felt normal. At least that was how it looked from the outside. But behind closed doors, something slowly changed. Small disagreements became bigger conversations. Simple questions turned into moments of frustration. We started hearing criticism in each other's words, even when that was not what was intended. Every night seemed to end the same way, with both of us believing we were the only one trying to make things work. Noah was quiet when something bothered him. I was the opposite. I wanted to talk through every problem immediately. I thought communication meant solving everything in the moment. Noah thought some things needed time before they could be explained. Neither of us was completely wrong, but somehow we kept making each other feel misunderstood. The strange thing was that there was never one major moment when everything changed. There was no single argument that destroyed everything. It was a collection of small moments that slowly created distance between us. A missed conversation, a forgotten promise, a night when we both wanted to say something but decided it was easier to stay quiet. Then came the morning I never expected. I woke up and noticed the apartment felt different. It was not because of noise or anything dramatic. It was because everything was too quiet. When I walked into the living room, I saw Noah's bags near the door. For a few seconds, I just stood there trying to understand what I was seeing. Noah looked at me with an expression I could not read. He was not angry. He was not trying to make a point. He simply looked tired. He told me he thought leaving was the only way we could both find some peace. I wanted to ask him 100 questions at once. Why now? Why this way? Why did he not tell me how serious things had become? But before I could say anything, he picked up his bags and walked out. The door closed quietly behind him, and somehow that silence felt louder than all the arguments we had ever had. For the first time in a long time, I was alone with my own thoughts. I started replaying every conversation, every disagreement, and every moment when I assumed I knew what Noah was thinking. I wondered if I had been listening to respond instead of listening to understand. Days passed, and the apartment that once felt full of life suddenly felt unfamiliar. But then I found something Noah left behind. Something I never expected to see. And the moment I discovered what it was, I realized the story I had been telling myself about why he left might have been completely wrong. After Noah left, I thought the silence would be the hardest thing to handle. I expected to miss the conversations, the familiar routines, and the small moments that had become part of my everyday life. What I did not expect was how much I would miss the person I thought I understood. The apartment was the same, but everything felt different. The coffee cup Noah always used was still in the cabinet. His favorite chair was still by the window. The little reminders of him were everywhere, and each one made me question whether I had truly seen what was happening between us. For the first few days, I kept telling myself that Noah made his choice. I told myself that leaving was easier for him than trying to fix things. But every time I thought about that, something inside me felt uncertain. Noah was not someone who gave up easily. He was the person who stayed late to finish difficult projects, the person who kept trying even when things became complicated. So why would he suddenly walk away from us without saying more? That question stayed in my mind until I remembered the item I found after he left. It was a small notebook sitting on the shelf near the place where Noah kept his things. At first, I thought it was just something he forgot. I almost put it away without looking, but then I noticed my name written on the first page. I stopped for a moment because I knew whatever was inside was something Noah never intended to say out loud. I opened it carefully and began reading. The first few pages were not what I expected. There was no anger, no list of complaints, no explanation about why I had been difficult to live with. Instead, I found thoughts Noah had written over time. He wrote about moments when he felt like he was failing at communicating. He wrote about times when he wanted to explain himself but did not know how. The more I read, the more I realized that the arguments I remembered were not the same moments Noah remembered. I saw my own actions from a different perspective. I remembered nights when I thought Noah was ignoring me. But according to his notes, those were the nights when he was trying to find the right words because he did not want to say something he would regret. I remembered moments when I thought he stopped caring. But he wrote about how much he cared and how difficult it was for him to show it. Reading those words was uncomfortable because they forced me to question the story I had created. I had spent so much time believing Noah was choosing distance that I never considered he might have been struggling too. That night, I sat alone in the living room with the notebook in my hands, realizing that two people could experience the same relationship in completely different ways. I thought about all the times we argued and how we both walked away believing we were unheard. Maybe we were not fighting because we did not care. Maybe we were fighting because we cared and did not know how to express it. Then I reached the final page. There was only one sentence written there, and it changed everything I thought I knew about why Noah left. The final sentence on Noah's notebook was only a few words, but it changed the way I looked at everything. I left because staying while we were hurting each other felt harder than walking away. I read that sentence again and again, trying to understand what Noah meant. For so long, I believed he left because he stopped caring. I believed he chose distance because our relationship no longer mattered to him. But those words showed me something I had never considered. Maybe leaving was not about giving up. Maybe it was about trying to protect something that still mattered. I spent the entire night thinking about the moments that led us there. I remembered every argument, every misunderstanding, and every time we both walked away frustrated. But now I started noticing something different. Noah was rarely angry because he wanted to win. He was usually quiet because he was trying to avoid making things worse. I had always seen his silence as a lack of effort. I never considered that silence might have been his way of handling emotions he did not know how to express. The next morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table where we used to have our conversations. Felt strange being there alone. For years, I thought I understood Noah because I knew his habits, his personality, and the way he approached life. But reading his notebook made me realize that knowing someone's routine does not mean knowing their heart. I decided to read more pages, hoping I would find answers. Instead, I found memories. Noah wrote about small moments I had completely forgotten. He wrote about the first time we met, when I helped him feel comfortable in a new city. He wrote about times when I supported him without expecting anything in return. He even wrote about moments when he wanted to tell me that he appreciated me but could not find the right words. Those pages were difficult to read because they showed me how differently we experienced the same years. I remembered our disagreements as proof that we were becoming strangers. Noah remembered them as moments when he was afraid of losing someone important. That realization stayed with me. Two people can stand in the same room, hear the same words, and still walk away with completely different feelings. I thought about how many times I focused on what Noah did instead of asking why he did it. I focused on his reactions but ignored the emotions behind them. For the first time, I wondered if I had been so focused on feeling misunderstood that I forgot to understand him. Later that day, I looked at my phone and considered calling Noah. My first instinct was to ask him why he left. But after reading his notebook, I realized that question was not the one I truly wanted to ask. The question I needed answered was much deeper. I wanted to know how long he had been carrying those feelings alone. I wanted to know why he believed leaving was the only option. Most importantly, I wanted to know if there was still a chance for us to have the conversation we avoided for so long. I picked up my phone, stared at his name, and took a moment before pressing the call button. Because for the first time since Noah left, I was not calling to defend myself. I was calling because I was finally ready to listen. The phone rang only twice before Noah answered. For a moment, neither of us said anything. It was strange how a person who had shared so much of my life could suddenly feel like a stranger on the other end of a call. I wanted to say so many things, but after everything I had learned from his notebook, I knew this conversation could not be about proving who was right. It had to be about finally understanding each other. Noah was the first to speak. His voice sounded calm, but I could tell he was surprised that I called. He asked if everything was okay, and that simple question made me realize something important. Even after leaving, even after needing space, he still cared enough to worry about me. I told him I found the notebook. There was a long pause. Then Noah quietly said he had hoped I would never find it. Not because he was ashamed of what he wrote, but because he was afraid I would read his thoughts without him being there to explain them. I understood that feeling because I had spent years doing the same thing. I had looked at Noah's actions and created my own explanation without ever asking him what was really happening. I asked him why he never told me how he felt before leaving. Noah admitted that he tried many times. He said there were countless moments when he wanted to sit down and explain everything, but every conversation seemed to happen when we were already frustrated. He said that when emotions were high, both of us became focused on protecting ourselves instead of listening. Hearing that was difficult because I knew he was right. I remembered those nights. I remembered preparing my response before he finished speaking. I remembered assuming I already knew what he meant. I had spent so much time wanting Noah to understand me that I forgot he was waiting to be understood too. Noah told me that leaving was not an easy decision. He said he spent many nights wondering if he was making the right choice. But he felt that staying in the same pattern would only create more distance between us. He needed time to figure out how to communicate without turning every conversation into another disagreement. I asked him if he ever thought we could fix things. His answer surprised me. He said he always hoped we could. He just did not know if we both wanted the same thing anymore. That sentence stayed with me because I realized we had both been afraid of the same thing. We were both afraid that the other person no longer cared. We were both waiting for proof that we still mattered. After the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. I expected to feel angry or confused, but instead I felt something I had not felt in weeks. I felt hopeful. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, and not because the past could be erased. The problems between Noah and me were real. The misunderstandings happened. The hurt feelings existed. But now I finally understood where they came from. The next morning I sent Noah a message. I did not ask him to come back. I did not ask him to forget what happened. I simply asked if we could meet and have the conversation we should have had a long time ago. A few minutes later, he replied with one sentence that made me realize our story was not over yet. He said he would be there. When I saw Noah standing outside the coffee shop the next afternoon, I realized something important. The hardest part was not seeing him again. The hardest part was accepting that we were both carrying years of things we never said. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, unsure how to begin. The last time we stood face to face, he was leaving with his bags in his hands. This time, we were both there because we wanted to understand each other. Noah suggested we sit outside where we used to spend time together before life became complicated. It felt familiar, but also different. We were not the same two people who sat there years ago, trying to win every disagreement. We were two people who had finally realized that winning an argument was never the same as understanding someone. I started the conversation by apologizing. Not for everything that happened, because I knew we both played a part in creating the distance between us. I apologized for the moments when I stopped listening because I thought I already knew what Noah meant. I apologized for assuming his silence meant he did not care. Noah listened quietly, then told me he had things to apologize for too. He admitted that he often expected me to understand feelings he never clearly explained. He said he wanted me to notice what he needed without having to say it, and he realized that was not fair. People cannot understand what we never allow them to see. That sentence stayed with me because it described so much of our relationship. We were both waiting for the other person to read between the lines. We were both disappointed when they could not. Noah told me about the months before he left. He said he felt like every conversation ended with both of us feeling more alone. He was not leaving because he stopped caring. He was leaving because he was scared that we would continue hurting each other emotionally if nothing changed. I told him that I had felt the same fear. I had been afraid that maybe the person I loved being around was becoming someone I could no longer reach. Hearing him say those words made me realize something I had ignored. We were never fighting because we wanted to be apart. We were fighting because we did not know how to stay close. The conversation lasted for hours. We talked about the past, but we also talked about the future. We discussed the habits we needed to change and the ways we could communicate better. There were no dramatic promises that everything would suddenly be perfect. Instead, there was honesty. There was patience. There was a willingness to try. Before we left, Noah looked at me and said he was sorry for leaving without giving us one more chance to talk. I told him I was sorry for making him feel like talking would not matter. For the first time in months, we both felt heard. As we walked away from the coffee shop, I knew we still had a lot to figure out. The problems that brought us here did not disappear in one afternoon. But something had changed. We were no longer two people standing on opposite sides of the same problem. We were two people finally standing together, trying to solve it. After our conversation at the coffee shop, Noah and I both understood that rebuilding trust would take more than one honest conversation. We had spent years creating habits that pushed us apart, and changing those habits would require patience from both of us. Still, something felt different. For the first time in a long time, we were no longer trying to prove our own point. We were trying to understand each other. A few days later, Noah and I met again at the apartment. It was the same place where so many difficult conversations had happened, but the atmosphere felt completely different. There was no tension waiting between us. There was no feeling that one wrong sentence could turn everything into another disagreement. Instead, there was a sense that we were finally creating a new beginning in a place that once held so many complicated memories. Noah told me that leaving had given him time to think about the person he wanted to become. He admitted that he had spent years avoiding difficult conversations because he was afraid of making things worse. He believed that staying quiet would prevent problems, but he eventually realized that silence could create even more distance. I understood that because I had my own pattern. I tried to solve every problem immediately, but sometimes I focused so much on finding an answer that I forgot to understand the emotion behind the problem. We both had different ways of handling difficult moments, and instead of accepting those differences, we spent years treating them like weaknesses. That realization changed the way I saw our past. The arguments were not proof that we were wrong for each other. They were signs that we needed to learn how to communicate better. Noah and I started making small changes. We asked more questions instead of assuming we already knew the answers. We gave each other time to explain feelings instead of immediately defending ourselves. Most importantly, we stopped seeing disagreements as something we had to win. We started seeing them as opportunities to learn more about each other. One evening, while we were cooking dinner together, Noah mentioned something from the early days when we first lived together. He said he remembered how excited he was when we moved into the apartment. He said he thought we would have everything figured out because we knew each other so well. I laughed because I remembered feeling the same way. We both believed that knowing someone meant understanding everything about them. But we learned that even the people closest to us can still have thoughts and feelings they have never shared. That night, we talked about how much we had changed. We were no longer the same people who avoided difficult conversations. We were learning how to be honest without being hurtful and how to express what we needed without expecting the other person to guess. I realized that relationships are not built because two people never have problems. They are built because two people choose to face those problems together. Noah leaving was painful, but it also created the moment when we finally stopped ignoring what was happening between us. If he had stayed and we continued the same patterns, we might have lost the connection completely. Instead, the distance gave us the chance to return with a better understanding of each other. For the first time, I was not afraid of the future because I knew we were no longer trying to hold on to the past. We were building something new, one honest conversation at a time. After the changes Noah and I started making, our relationship entered a stage I never thought was possible. We were no longer trying to fix the past every single day. Instead, we were learning how to create something healthier in the present. It was a strange feeling because for so long, I believed our biggest problem was the fact that we were different. Now I understood that our differences were never the reason we struggled. The real problem was that we never learned how to appreciate those differences. Noah had always processed things quietly. He needed time to organize his thoughts before sharing them. I was someone who wanted answers immediately because uncertainty made me uncomfortable. For years, we both believed the other person needed to change. But now we were discovering that understanding did not mean changing someone. It meant learning how they experienced the world. One weekend, Noah and I decided to visit some of the places that reminded us of the early years of our relationship. We walked through a neighborhood near downtown Seattle where we used to spend time together. It was interesting seeing those places again because the memories felt different. The locations had not changed, but we had. We talked about the moments we once considered difficult and found ourselves laughing about how serious everything felt back then. Noah told me that one of the things he appreciated most was that we could finally talk about those memories without letting them control us. I agreed because I realized that healing did not mean pretending the past never happened. It meant accepting what happened and understanding what we learned from it. Later that evening, we sat by the window of our apartment and talked about what we wanted our future to look like. Noah admitted that he was still afraid sometimes. He said that leaving had been a major decision, and returning meant accepting that things could not simply go back to the way they were before. I understood because I felt the same. We did not want to rebuild the old relationship. We wanted to build a better one. That difference mattered. We started focusing on small things that showed respect and care. We checked in with each other more often. We asked instead of assuming. We listened without preparing a response. These changes might have seemed simple to someone else, but for us, they represented everything we had struggled with before. I began noticing that the strongest moments between us were not the big conversations. They were the small, everyday moments. Sharing coffee in the morning, talking about our day after work, laughing at something completely random. Those moments reminded me that connection is often built quietly over time. One evening, Noah told me something that stayed with me. He said he never wanted us to become two people who only remembered the difficult parts of our story. He wanted us to remember that there were also good moments, moments that proved why we cared about each other in the first place. Hearing that made me realize how easy it is to let painful memories become the only memories we see. But people and relationships are more complicated than that. Noah and I had experienced distance, confusion, and disappointment. But we had also experienced growth, honesty, and a second chance. For the first time, I understood that staying was not about never leaving. It was about choosing each other after learning how to truly understand one another. As Noah and I continued moving forward, I realized that rebuilding our relationship was not about forgetting what happened. It was about understanding why it happened and choosing to do things differently. The biggest change was not that we stopped having disagreements. The biggest change was that disagreements no longer made us feel like we were losing each other. We had finally learned that two people can see the same situation differently and still care deeply about one another. A few months after Noah came back, our apartment started feeling like a home again. The same rooms that once held uncomfortable silence were now filled with conversations and ordinary moments that meant more than we realized. We created new routines, but this time they were built on honesty instead of assumptions. One evening, Noah and I were sitting together after dinner when he brought up something he had been thinking about. He said that leaving had taught him something important about himself. He realized that he spent years believing people should understand him without him explaining what he felt. He thought staying quiet would make things easier, but he learned that silence could create confusion. I told him I had learned something similar. I spent years believing that if someone cared about me, they would naturally know what I needed. But people are not able to understand thoughts that are never shared. That realization changed the way I approached every conversation. We started becoming more intentional with each other. When something bothered us, we talked about it before it became something bigger. When we disagreed, we focused on the issue instead of making it about each other. Felt simple, but it was something we had never truly done before. One weekend, Noah suggested that we return to the coffee shop where we had our first honest conversation after he left. Sitting there again felt meaningful because it reminded us how far we had come. The same place where we once faced uncertainty had become a reminder of growth. Noah told me that he used to think leaving was the moment everything ended. But now he saw it as the moment when we were finally forced to be honest. Without that distance, we might have continued repeating the same patterns. I agreed because sometimes people need space to understand what they were unable to see while they were standing in the middle of a problem. That afternoon, we talked about the future. Not with unrealistic promises that everything would always be perfect, but with a simple commitment to keep choosing honesty. We knew there would still be difficult days. We knew misunderstandings could happen again. But now we had something we did not have before. We had the ability to talk through those moments instead of allowing them to create distance. Looking back, I used to think Noah leaving was the worst thing that happened to us. I thought it represented failure. But now I saw it differently. Sometimes a person has to step away before both people can understand what they truly need. Noah did not leave because our connection was meaningless. He left because he wanted us to stop hurting each other in ways we did not understand. And when he came back, we were no longer trying to return to the past. We were creating something stronger from everything we had learned. The person I once thought was walking away from me was actually the person who helped me understand what it meant to truly stay. Looking back at everything that happened between Noah and me, I realized the moment he left was not the end of our story. It was the moment that forced us to finally understand what we had been missing all along. For years, we believed our biggest problem was that we were too different. We thought we saw life in completely opposite ways, and we treated those differences like something that separated us. But the truth was much simpler. We were two people who cared about each other but never learned how to communicate that care in a way the other person could understand. When Noah walked back into my life, I expected answers about the past. I expected explanations for the arguments, the distance, and the silence that grew between us. What I did not expect was to learn something about myself. I learned that listening is not just hearing someone speak. It is allowing yourself to consider that your version of the story might not be the complete one. Noah taught me that people often hide struggles behind the things we misunderstand most. His quiet moments were not signs that he did not care. His need for space was not a sign that he wanted to leave. Sometimes people step back because they are trying to find a better way to move forward. I also learned that love and connection are not built on never having problems. They are built on how two people choose to handle those problems. Noah and I still had moments when we disagreed. We still had different opinions and different ways of seeing situations. But the difference was that we no longer treated those moments as threats. We treated them as chances to learn more about each other. Months later, I found myself sitting in the same apartment where everything once felt uncertain. The same place where I watched Noah pack his bags had become the place where we created new memories. It reminded me that spaces do not hold only painful memories. They can also hold growth, forgiveness, and second chances. Noah once told me that he never wanted us to forget what happened. He said that remembering the difficult moments helped us appreciate how much we had changed. I agreed because the past was not something we needed to erase. It was something we needed to understand. If we had never struggled, we might never have learned how important honesty was. If Noah had never left, we might have continued avoiding the conversations that mattered most. Sometimes the hardest moments in life are the ones that reveal what truly matters. The person I once thought was walking away from me was actually someone who helped me see things I could not see before. Noah did not just return to my life. He returned with a better understanding of himself, and I returned with a better understanding of what it means to truly listen. Our story was never about two people who stopped caring. It was about two people who had to learn how to care in the right way. And in the end, the greatest change was not that Noah came back. The greatest change was that when he did, we were finally ready to understand why we wanted to stay.